Hello and welcome to episode 3 of the MLS Fantasy Insider Podcast, our review of round 1 and preview of round 2. This episode is brought to you by Snow Classico 2019 for when playing at altitude is not challenging enough. Oh, no. Actually, it's brought to you by MLSFantasyBoss.com and the fantastic Patreon community of the MLS Fantasy Insider Podcast. To learn more about that community, head over to patreon.com/MLSFI. That's patreon.com/MLSFI. I'm your host, Reid Connolly from MLSFantasyBoss.com. We're mixing things up a little bit tonight. I'm joined by regular co-host Blayne Riffle. I'm also joined by Ryan Anderson, a.k.a. at MLS Fantasy Stats on Twitter. You may have seen some of his stuff on MLS Fantasy Boss and other places around the web. I'll let him talk about that in a second. We may have Mike with us tonight, but he has been traveling, so he may join us late. He may not join us at all, so we'll see what happens if his beautiful face pops up in the bottom corner at some point later on. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing well.
I'm not going to say doing well because everyone always says doing well. So I'm doing fantastic. Never better.
There we go. Fantastic. Jason says hello, friends. So,
oh, there we go. I haven't heard him for a year, though. So
well, we're happy to have you here tonight, Ryan. I know that we had a particular question that everyone was sending it to me tonight. A little teaser for everybody else. Everyone kept asking what was up with all these away points that were going on, and I thought I've got to have one of our stats guys on the show tonight, and I'm glad you could come because we're going to dig into that in a second. And
happy to be here.
I hope people enjoy that. Yeah, thank you. Thanks for joining. But first, let's talk about round 1, our little recap, fantasy-focused recap. So we're starting out as we always do. How'd your teams do, Blayne?
85 points on the round, 502 overall, which for an opening weekend is not bad. I usually have a slow start every season, and this is no exception. I mean, this is actually better than I think the last 3 seasons overall. Usually I start somewhere around the 1500s, so I'll take hovering at 500 right now. I did really well with Ladero and Acosta, and then Zlatan and Rui Diaz both kind of came through as those single goal forwards, the poacher style. Zlatan got a bonus point. Rui Diaz didn't get any. But all of my premium players that I brought in, which I could fit 4 of them in, went up in value. Big thing to look for is first week value and 2.6 up overall. I think some of the highest ones I was seeing on Twitter and Reddit were around 3. Yep. Corey Burke was my only loss on value. I mean, without that, that's a 2.9 increase. And if I had grabbed somebody better, like a Dominic Badji or something, I might have been able to crack that 3-1, 3-2 mark. But I'll take my 2.6. It seems to be a pretty good average this week and go from there. I mean, super subs, Elliott and Hollingshead on the bench, I let them both come in at 4 and 5. I mean, when you're talking that 4.5 price point and you're getting 4 and 5 points on them, you're not going to do any better with any higher priced players for points per money on that. So got to go with it.
It occurs to me that tonight we should maybe call this the bearded review because all 3 of us are rocking the beard to various lengths. You're winning that one, Blayne.
I'm just the laziest one in the group.
No, that
was the reason why for me, actually. Anymore.
Ryan, how'd your team do?
Slightly better. Let's see. Let me actually pull it up here. So I got 86, which puts me at week rank 433 and surprisingly overall rank 433. I also had Ibrahimovic. I captained Lodero, which I was very happy about, and I ended up picking up Victor Rodriguez as well, and so those guys both got 14 points apiece. And so they made up the bulk of my points, kind of sadly. But my favorite pick of the week was actually that I had Sauro from Columbus, my defender, and he got 10 points. Yeah. I switched out. There was another Columbus defender that I had in there. What was it?
Francis, I think.
Yeah, I had Francis in, and I'm like, he's going to be the wing back or the other one. So I'm going to pick a guy that's going to get more bonus points. Well, turns out Sauro actually was the one who got the goal. He was the attacking guy that game. So I switched over to him, and he ended up performing pretty well for me. But I had Hollingshead as well. My bench was terrible, which is really good that I put all the guys that I wanted to in the starting lineup, though. So.
Yeah, it was a pretty crazy round for some of these goals on the defender side. All four of the top scoring defenders had double-digit points. I think they all had goals. And then two Minnesota players were there in the best XI overall. Calvo was in there, who I know Mike likes to rag on a lot. And then Quintero was the best player to have been. There you go, rock it out. Quintero was the best player to have been a captain this week. He got 36 points as a captain, though Ladero and Acosta and Valeri Rodriguez not far behind, 14, 15 points there. So if you picked one of those guys, solid options. If you went with Mike's suggestion and Blayne's initially until he was converted, Zlatan, then sorry. I had a slightly not as good as you guys, 78 points. My biggest problem that I had was the injury to Alessandrini, which I know a lot of people felt that. It's sad to see that. We do hope that he does get better. We'll have a little update about that a little bit later in the show. So that was the biggest point to me. My defenders did fine. I went total budget like I was talking about. Vega, Hollingshead, Smith from Seattle, and then Francis and Wagner. Smith and Hollingshead got 5 points, which is fine. Vega didn't get much, and Francis and Wagner just got 1 and 2 points right there. So could have been a little bit better, but I mean, budget defense, I was really hoping for most of it to come out of the offense, and Alessandrini would help me a lot. Also disappointed in Lee Wynn. He was projected to be in the middle, but he ended up playing out on the right wing, so I think that took him out of a lot of the buildup. And, of course, Sporting Kansas City did not rotate anybody. So I know a lot of us were really banking on that for some of this offensive production, and it didn't happen. So, but he got 5 points still, which is not too shabby for someone who really didn't do a whole lot, wasn't able to do a whole lot there. Also had Ladero, Acosta. I had Zlatan there in the front. I had Baji on the bench, which I was really happy with his 5 points coming off with the assist. I think he'll be a good one to watch going forward. So, you know, it's not a bad round. Overall, the average for the round was 59 points. So if you are a new player and you got if you got 60 points or more, that's fine. You did better than most of the tens of thousands of people who I have not looked at the actual total right now, but you have done better than, what is this, like 25,000 people, whoever's how many you're playing. You've done better than
22,661.
Oh, there we go. 23,000 people. You've done better than almost 23,000 people if you got better than 60. I know that math's not right, but just roll with it. Be happy. That's what we're going for right now. In the top 100, though, the average was in the low 90s. I didn't actually figure it up, maybe a mid 90s, but I think the top 25% of those players, so maybe 25-ish, got triple digits, and then a whole bunch of 90s after that. So it's probably low 90s. Is where you're looking at for an average in the top 100. In the MLS Fantasy Insider Experts Head-to-Head League, our average was 80. So if you got more than 80 points, you're doing better than a lot of the experts that we had. So kudos to you right there, especially you new guys. Congrats on that. Let's do a quick review before we get into some of our discussion points. There was a lot of success for budget players. If you already picked up on that, talking about the top teams, their great day for budget defenders. De Leon got 13 points. He was at that point 5.0. Leerdam got 9 points. He was 5.0. Though I will say, if you guys noticed this, Leerdam got that goal, kind of ricocheted off and got it. I still like Smith because he is sending those passes and crosses in, so I think that could pay off in the long run, but we will get to that in defenders, I guess. But Leerdam got it in round 1. He was at that point 5.0. Steers over at LA, 8 points was 5.0. Sorrow, like you already mentioned, 10 points and was 4.5. That's amazing. Henry got 11 over with Vancouver's now. Yeah, and 4.5. And then Figueroa at Houston, 8 points at 4.5. So lots of good value there. We had some people who were asking about budget people to keep an eye on. So these are some of the names. If you want to look at that, if you're hoping for continued success, you can keep an eye on that. In the midfielders, Mueller, 11 points, and he was then 6.5. Ivan at New York Red Bulls, 10 points was 5.5. Moreno, 8 points was 6.0. And then Bertone, my man, 8 points at then 6.5 with the killer volley to open up FC Cincinnati scoring in that game. We were at no point always behind in that game. Let that be known. Let that be known for the history books. Then finally, some of the forwards. Already mentioned Baji got 5 points. He was 6.5. Akindele got 7 points. He was in 6. Lewis got 5 points, was 6, and then Baird at RSL got 7 points, and he was 6.5. So budget performances all around, some good. If you had differentials, that really paid off. As far as the games went, and guys, feel free to jump in and stop me if I'm missing something or wrong. Bradley really started the redemption for Toronto. That was the first upset that we had with the away teams. 3-1 for Toronto. I know people had a lot of concerns about them with CCL, and we're looking at Philly's new look system. Fantasy-wise, Fabian did pretty well for them, but keep an eye on that Philadelphia team. It may not be gelling as much. Toronto may be on an uptick, so those players may be back into your consideration with fantasy players.
The Philadelphia team, I ended up with 3 defenders of theirs because they were all cheap. That didn't work. Elliott was the highest scoring, and luckily he was the one that I had put on the field, but the other 2 only got 1 and 2 points, and it was not good.
Yeah, it was rough. Rusnak, someone who was not rough, which we expected, also a road team. He scored on the road and in Houston, ended up getting a 1-1 draw against Houston. And that's just something to take note because RSL was horrible on the road last year. So if that is going to be an indicator of some better things to come in the future, then people should keep an eye on that. It may make some of those RSL players people to consider during a proper matchup. Rusnak's usually the first name on that list. 6 goals in Colorado. We talked about that snowpocalypse up there, Snow Classico, whatever you want to call it. 3 goals for Colorado, 3 goals for Portland, in that up in a draw. However, I will say the first goal from Portland didn't come clearly until after Valeri's PK when Hoberry got the red card, and for most of it was for I guess like 70 minutes of that game, it was 10 men for Colorado, and they still had a 3-3 draw. That included that PK and an own goal. So, I mean, I don't think we should look at this as, Colorado is still bad. I think fantasy managers need to keep an eye on these players because there's some skill here, some production, and Portland got a little bit of luck.
Yeah, and don't sleep on this. Diego Rubio got hurt 30 minutes in, right around that same time as that PK. So one of their first choice forwards had to come off, and they were down a man, or I guess they took him off for the defense. But I mean, that was 3 goals, 2 of them after going down to 10 men, and without one of their better harassing pieces up top. Like, Colorado is legit this year, and especially at home, they're going to give everybody a run, and they showed it this week. The young kid rookie, Shinyashiki.
Close enough.
Shinyashiki.
Even better for this show.
I butchered one this year, so it has to happen at some point. Yeah, I mean, coming in, getting that 94th minute equalizer. Colorado's going to give teams fits at home. The altitude and this attacking core is going to be something we have to watch in fantasy all season long. Between Kamara, Rubio, Benny, Acosta got in there with the assist this week. That's just a lot of presence going forward and a lot for defenses to try to track.
Something you won't notice going on is Blaine's chair is not squeaking. We had some people talk about that, and he WD-40 up. Look at that.
No squeak.
No squeak.
I will. I'll just say the analytics community is not necessarily as high on Diego Rubio as some other people are. I know he scored a lot of goals, but the rate at which he scored was astronomical. Like there's no way he's going to sustain that over the length of the season. He'd have like 50 goals if that were the case. And so just he would come in as the super sub, and that was kind of his role, and he played it extremely well. And so it will be something to look out throughout the season as how does he work with a 2-man front instead of a 3-man front, with only playing with Kamara up there, and how does he work into this team as well? So I mean, he got injured, so we didn't get to see much of him, but that one will be something to look forward. But don't trust his numbers from last year as something from going forward, especially because he's in a new system as well.
Yeah, as a sporting fan, I can agree with that. Just his work rate for Colorado is going to create good things for everybody else, if nothing else.
Mention a few more games going through here. I didn't get to catch it yet, but Minnesota, Vancouver, I've heard a lot of good things about. Minnesota got the win. There you go, Ryan, right there. 3-2 over Vancouver, but I know we all had a lot of questions about Vancouver coming into this game, and it looks like they do have some skill and some talent and some offense right there. maybe not a defense, but there's some credit to Minnesota there as well for that. But definitely both of those teams have players to keep an eye on. Don't overlook them as just not helpful as may have happened in 2018 or the past. So some good options there to keep an eye on.
I'll make one mention about Minnesota that I happen to know from a lot of conversations I've had with people. The 2 goals that were scored on Minnesota were from set pieces. And that's something that Minnesota struggled with last year. And it still appears to be something that they struggled with this year. The first goal was scored. Let's say there was, I think, 3 defenders didn't mark their man. It was pretty obvious, and so it's one of those things that I don't exactly know what to make of it going forward. But because it seems like that should be something that a team should be able to work on, like just follow your man. Like they just stopped, and so it's something that could be worked on as a team. But it could also be an indicator for the future. So keep an eye on if there's teams that are really good at set pieces. Minnesota might be a team down the road that you may want to look into as a potential option, especially if you've got some guys that take those set pieces. Some of those midfielders that are the main set piece takers. Minnesota might be a good team to play them against.
There we go. And we had a question about PK takers and set piece takers. We're going to hold off on that one right now. We're going to wait a couple of weeks just so we can have a few more games to look at to see if things may change, especially with the CCL stuff going on. We want to give time for all the teams to sort of settle into their normal routine. LA Chicago, going to mention this one real quick. A couple of us predicted that this could be a goal fest on the last episode, and it was not. 2-1 with some last-minute heroics there at the end. I don't know if this says more for Chicago's defense or LA's defense, or maybe it's just worth keeping an eye on. But Zlatan got his goal. There was an injury to Alessandrini, which I think was a big part of this as well, but not as high scoring as we thought. So still keep an eye on these teams going forward. For me, I want to wait a little bit and see, because it's optimistic for their defenses that they didn't really concede much in this game, but it's the first game, so you never know.
Yeah, huge fantasy note here. Nemanja Nikolic has kind of been their go-to striker in Chicago. He looks like a healthy 18, but Sapong got the start. I know Chicago, right before the start of the season, dumped $450K to Philly for Sapong, and Sapong starts the season and gets a goal at the start of the second half, first goal of the game. Looked really good on the road.
Now, so, I did hear that he had just had a child, and so he had been off some time with that. So there is some speculation that Sapong may not continue to start once he's worked back in.
Yeah,
who's the he in that situation? Who had the child?
Nico.
Okay, I see.
Yeah,
and that may explain it. I didn't hear anything as to why, but if Nico doesn't start producing and Sapong's going to do that against LA on the road, I mean, I know LA's not the greatest defense, but you've got to watch that at 7.4. I mean, that's much better than where Nico's at.
From one more thing from the analytics community, Sapong has always been pretty high. I mean, he's never been an elite striker, but he's always been pretty high on the expected goals side of things. And a lot of people have said, "Oh, he's just not a good finisher." And I mean, we typically say, "Well, finishing is not as important as everybody thinks it is." But even if he's not that good of a finisher, just the number of chances that he creates. He's up in the, and he's probably in, I would say, the top 20, 30 strikers in the league. So you can always count on him to have generally good numbers if they actually play him.
You can't finish if you never try, right?
Yeah, there you go.
How it works. I will mention again, we touched on it, the beatdown in Seattle. FC Cincinnati, while they got the first goal, ended up losing 4-1. A lot of what happened in their last game against the Crew in preseason happened again. They were able to be exploited with some of the channels on defense and some of the speed that happened there on the wings to get through them. Though I will say that I was right. They were able to stay compact enough in the middle that Rui Diaz wasn't really able to do much during that game, which was my concern with him last week and why I went with Ladero. At one point, I also had Rodriguez in my team, but I swapped out for some diversity, which is fine. I got Acosta, which was, I guess, 1 point more in the long run. But yeah, a lot of that's happening. Will likely probably still happen as Cincinnati's trying to figure things out. Bobby Warshaw had a pretty rough review of this on one of the latest episodes of Extra Time, just talking about how the team wanted to probably come out saying we're not afraid of anybody and try to really play both ways. Did not work out. That's not how they're built. And he just said it was bad and brings a lot of questions up. And I kind of agree. I mean, there's the team set up to be a defensive reaction counterattacking team, and that's not really what we try to do. But that's a team to bet against, it looks like, going forward. So fantasy managers should keep an eye on that until things start to change. Last two games we'll mention real quick. Actually, we're not going to talk about Sporting Kansas City. I already mentioned that. They didn't rotate. DC holds Atlanta scoreless. That was our only clean sheet of the round. I know people were really hunting for that. Some people were, which we don't always recommend, but kind of a shock to see the defending champions in Atlanta not even score a goal. CCL, though, is a thing, and I think that played a big part into this game. And DC is no joke. They were strong at the end of the year. They're at home. Rooney and Acosta are still linking up very well. And it looks like their defense has solidified a little bit more. So DC's definitely one to keep an eye on for all-around team. In Atlanta, I wouldn't be super down on them right now, especially wait to see what happens after CCL, who they line up against Cincinnati. There could be some points right there.
Although it could be the same story as Toronto. I mean,
it could be the same story as Toronto.
I probably won't go that far, but
all right. So that's what I have, guys, for the fantasy reviews. Anything else that you want to point out, specifically fantasy from this first round? Nope.
I liked that. Maybe this is just more a self-congratulations, but I like that I picked Vaco and he got 7 points. So I was happy with that. I figured that he was a high floor player that I could get a few points off of, and he came through on that, and he might be a good pick against Minnesota this week as a result of that. So that's
we should mention.
I'll preview my picks later. There,
Erickson was another one who got a goal right there.
Oh, yeah,
something too. So San Jose's got some people to keep an eye on seriously, I think, as well. Quick housekeeping before we get to our discussion. There were some cards, some red cards in round one I want everyone to know about. Matias Vero from Houston had 2 yellow cards, and he got sent off, so he won't be playing in the next game. Axel Hoberry got a straight red card for denial of a goal-scoring opportunity, and so he will be out. And then Roger Espinoza got 2 yellow cards. There were like 400 yellow cards during that game. Seriously, there were like 10 or 11 yellow cards during that game. So it was it was crazy. But so he will be out as well. Injuries, Blayne already mentioned Rubio, which I wasn't sure if that one was an injury.
I'm not sure if that's an injury. The more I look at it,
okay.
I didn't see the red card when I saw him come off the first time.
Keep an eye on Rubio. I thought it was because of the red card.
I think it is tactical. I think that was my mistake.
2 definite injuries. We have LA Galaxy's Alessandrini, which we already mentioned. It looked like a hamstring from what he was doing on the field. And just so you would have an idea, that's usually a 3 to 8 week recovery time, typically 3 week for a level 1 hamstring, just a pull. 8 is when some of the tearing might start. So we're hoping it's not that. So we're hoping that maybe he'll be back in 3 weeks, or that they at least give him that much time to sort of rest up. Also Sporting Kansas City's Andrew Fontas. Did I get that right, Blayne? Andreu, see, I mean, it's like Atreyu from Neverending Story, but Andreu Fontas had a hip pointer injury, which I don't know what that really means, but I looked it up, and it usually has a 1 to 3 week typical recovery time. And Blayne, you had mentioned that they're hoping to get him back for the 10th, right?
Yeah, he left LA for Kansas City after the game. I believe the rest of the team was headed to Panama for their upcoming game this week. They're eyeing a return on Sunday versus Philly for Fontas, but I know Vermes won't push this one and risk further injury.
So there we go. Maybe a 2 weeks for him. Then finally, no double game weeks in round 2. However, there are 2 teams that are on a bye. Who are on a bye? Toronto and the New York Red Bulls. So if you're looking for some switcheroo options right there, those would be the great players to put into your field that will definitely not play and screw up your switcheroos. All right, guys, let's move on to our discussion. This is why a lot of people are going to be listening this week. Our discussion topic is road team success. And since Ryan's here, we'll throw a little bit of XG into that as well, expected goals. So for everyone, just to get on the same starting foot, there were 3 away road victories that I think we should point out. And then there were also 5 draws, most of which were 1-1. So 8 of the 12 games ended with road teams getting points or victories completely, which is not always what we preach on this show about where options could come from. Personally, I think that I know Brian and I had exchanged some messages on Twitter about this, and I was like, I'm kind of surprised to see it, but when I think about it, it's just knock you off your feet, completely blows the water up. Surprising, because there were still a lot of strong attacking teams on the road. But Ryan, I'll just let you dig into this. What's going on with these road teams?
Oh, this is only one set of games so far. That's what I'd say. I'd use the old analytics classic sample size. That's pretty much what it is. It's I wouldn't take any of this to mean anything until we can look at 50, 60, 100, 200 games. 200 would be a lot probably compared to the rest of the season, but maybe 100 games before we can really start saying, is this a trend? But who knows? Maybe defenses don't gel as well at the beginning of the season, and offenses maybe have a better time of it. I don't know. That's something I haven't quite studied yet. But from the home and away perspective, there's nothing that can be said about it right now because it's only one game per team. So you can't see anything pretty much.
And the tradition with MLS is there is a noticeable home team advantage, especially when comparing it to other leagues.
Very much so. So I think from what I had looked at, and don't quote me on this one because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I think it was around. So whenever I do an expected goals model, I always multiply the home team by 1.15 or so, and I multiply the away team by 85%. So just by expecting, like, based off of their average, a typical team will score 15% fewer goals if they're away and 15% more goals approximately if they're the home team. And so you end up with a ratio, let's see, quick math here, 85 over 115 is equal to, so it ends up, I think it's about a 1.3, 1.4 times if you're a home team versus if you're an away team. And so that's one of the larger home field advantages in the, I'm going to say, the larger leagues in the world for a soccer perspective. I'll be careful with my words there. I'm not considering it like the big five. Don't hate me. But I think, so it is one of the larger gaps from a home field advantage perspective.
It's been a while since I've read some articles. I think the last thing I read was from 2015, so it's a little bit dated. But it was also even saying that that's one of the larger advantages in all of U.S. sports
in general. Yeah. Soccer itself is one of the soccer in general, because of how much the referee actually has involvement in the game and the ability to impact games with only, let's say, one decision, penalty kicks, for instance. Those are well known to be much more favored in home matches versus away matches. So that's just one example of what a home field advantage constitutes in soccer in general. And then you combine that with American sports, and you see it's up there definitely. I think hockey is another one that's fairly high. But things like basketball is actually very predictable. It doesn't have as much of a home field advantage for sports like basketball, but other factors play more of a role. There was a book on this at one point. I think it's called Scorecasting. It's a really good read about some of the hidden stuff behind the why in sports, and it's not just all about analytics, but it's a really good read if you ever want to pick it up. And it talks about how what is home field advantage actually comprised of or composed of. There we go.
I have to check that one out.
Issue. I love it. You're nerding out right there over something you love, and I've got a math major myself. I love.
Oh, there you go.
Statistics. Like, I just love hearing you nerd out. I would follow this up with a massive hot take.
I just like math. It's a hobby. I don't know.
We've got 3 people here that are mathing on the podcast.
Well, my mathing didn't help me last week, but
I was going to go massive hot take here. I did for one of the fan forums my predictions for how every team was going to rank out in the conferences before the season started. The only two surprising results that I have, according to where I kind of ranked my teams, was New England getting a result in Dallas, but I had both of them outside the playoffs, and then Toronto besting Philly as they did, but I had both of them. I have both of them outside the playoffs, so that the gap between those teams isn't much. It's a road game. Philly is in a formation shift, which I said would hurt them early on. I still think Philly will finish the season higher up the table than Toronto does, but that's a different story. So I look at all of these road results, and 75% of the 8 results, so 6 of the 8, kind of went the way I expected them to. I like the way Salt Lake plays, and I don't think Houston's as good as they're made out to be. I think Salt Lake's being very underrated right now. San Jose, we kind of talked about, was hot garbage. Montreal's got a solid team. They're kind of one of those should be playoff contenders. Red Bulls played a somewhat weakened lineup, but they were one of the deeper teams going to Columbus. I like that one. Minnesota's definitely better than Vancouver. Portland's better than Colorado, but Colorado showed a lot of fight. I mean, just a lot of these road results were better teams starting their season on the road, and they went in and gave it a good game. That's why we saw a lot of 1-1 draws. That's why we saw a lot of draws off. The road teams just came in, but they were the better teams going on the road. I mean, New York City to Orlando's another one. Orlando's improved this year. They're not that dumpster fire that we like to point at last year and pick against. New York City's taken a little bit of a downward spiral, but New York is still the better team there. They went down and got the 2-2 draw. Now there's a controversy there or whatever, but they got that road result, and it's kind of the way the power of the teams laid out. The stronger teams took the road the first game. If you flip all 8 of these games and play them at the other location, I say they're all pretty much landslide wins for the home team. You're going to see Salt Lake get a couple more goals. You're going to see New England play a little better. Red Bulls are going to have that better game. So it's just kind of the way this one laid out. Look at these road results. These are teams that I really like going forward. I mean, Minnesota maybe not quite so much, but they're definitely an improved team. So look at these results. These are your stronger teams in the league that went on the road and put up good fights this week against the odds, because we know how important home field is. So read into it what you need to. This was good performances by some quality teams in tough places to play.
Yeah, I think you guys are both right. What you draw, Blayne, is what I try to touch on at the beginning of the segment. About the quality of the teams, and then Ryan nails it. Of course, this is week 1. Step 1, or one of the first few steps of being a fantasy player and looking at some of these stats is don't overreact. Lots of things will revert back to the mean when given enough games, and don't be shocked when Ryan says 100 games. Don't think like, oh my gosh, that's great. We're talking like 4 weeks here. I mean that's nothing. That is a drop in the bucket.
Is it 12 games per week? So actually that would be
well, we got some buys coming in here, but I mean we're looking like midway through this first half of the season we'll have some good solid numbers to really draw from. But this is exactly why we always talk about the switcheroo so much. I've got the video over on YouTube. If you're listening to YouTube, just check out Pachow, I guess, is that how you do these things? For the link right there. This is why we recommend doing that, because if you do feel really good about an away player, you can put them on your bench and hedge your bets with the switcheroo here, get an auto-roo going, or just sort of see what you can do with that gut feeling, or go with it. I mean, players like Valeri, Piatti, these people, they're quality players who have the potential to produce both away and at home. I'm not going to throw out the fixture proof label at round 1 because that's crazy. And so few people even do actually legitimately earn that title. But it's definitely a wait and see, guys. Great questions, though, because I know that was on a lot of people's minds, because we do hit this hard. But trust me, it'll pan out. And maybe after like 5 or 6 weeks, we'll have Ryan back on. And if it doesn't, we'll be like, okay, now what?
What it can give you from a historical perspective on the home versus away fantasy points, not just our goals scored or not, is so I did write an article about it in for flowfc.com, and so I've got that on my Twitter feed as my pinned post. So if you want to go and check that out, I'll do my shout outs earlier. There we go. But it's I actually ran a regression to figure out what are the aspects that are most predictive of a defender, a forward, a midfielder, a goalkeeper actually scoring any points. And I took the whole 2017 season to do this. And turns out that by far and away the number one predictor of fantasy points is whether you're home or not, and that's just the way it is. However, if you look at the correlations, so we've got it's called a 0.26 correlation, and then you take the square of that, and that basically gives you the percentage of a. You're seeing me nerd out again. So you take the square of that, and that gives you kind of the percentage of the stuff going on that we can actually figure out with that particular thing. So defenders, for instance, if you pick away defenders, you're basically saying, I don't care about 8% of the score. So 0.26 is, what is that, 7? Yeah, so about 7% of a defender's score can be predicted by whether they're home or away. I mean, that's not always the case. This is on average. Of course, you're going to end up with Graham Zusi, who might be considered one of those almost matchup-proof players back last season. But on average, your defenders are not going to score very well if they're away. And that's by far the number one predictor. But even then, that's the thing I say about home versus away matchups is it is the highest predictor of success in fantasy. However, you're only explaining around 7% of a player's actual score for an average week. So it plays a major role, and it's the biggest factor that you can use. But it plays about as big of a role as let's see. Here's another one. So for midfielders, home field advantage plays about as big a role as their number of key passes. So it's one of those factors that it is the best one for in general, but you have to just say it doesn't explain everything, and oftentimes there will be matchups. I have taken a little bit less of a strong stance on the home only players, but it is something, especially for midfielders. Actually, that's interestingly enough, that's not the strongest indicator for midfielders, but it is for all the other players. Correction. Forwards actually have number of shots. So if you've got a player that shoots all the time, then of course you
covered that earlier.
Yeah.
You can't score if you don't shoot.
Yeah, exactly. So, but it is, generally speaking, it's one of the better indicators, but take it with a grain of salt. You could always find some players that you think will end up being a good matchup. You look at the formations and you think they got a weak left back, and you got a good right winger, like Elise or something like that going up against him, then maybe he might end up with a good matchup for him, even though he's away. So it's just, you got to take it into account. It's powerful, but there's always some caveats with that. And that's what analytics is. You just it's like it's about here. This is kind of the average of what it typically is, but it won't predict the actual results.
Great. Good stuff. Thanks, guys, for touching this. Everyone who was thinking about this issue, I hope that this information has helped you going forward, and to maybe know just simmer down, hold up. We'll see. Especially you new players, just keep having fun doing what you're doing. If you want to go with an away player, go with an away player. It's just all about having fun. But some of these home players they'll come in. They'll come in strong.
Never know. Darwin Quintero could score, I don't know. What was it, 16 points? Is that what it was?
Something like that, yeah. Yeah. All right, now we're going to move into our round 2 previews. Really excited to do this, and I see Lily has joined us. This round 2 preview portion of our show is brought to you by ESPN Plus. If you're interested in easily streaming MLS games and to keep up with your fantasy team, head over to MLSFantasyBoss.com right now and click on the ESPN Plus banner in the sidebar to learn more about how you can start your subscription for only $5 per month. I started doing that last week, and it was pretty easy, and it worked out pretty well. Good quality. All right, guys, so let's do this. We're going to start talking about keepers and defenders. First, be sure to mention just sort of your general strategies, what you're looking for, who you like, particularly who you like, because I'm going to write that down as part of our chalkboard at the end of the week. So I know you're sort of still warming up to some of this, Ryan. So Blayne, we'll start with you. Keepers and defenders, what do you think?
Yeah, like always, I start looking kind of for my clean sheets here, and I hate to say it, but Atlanta comes to mind, but I also like the Atlanta attack, so I started looking for my second one, because if at most I'm going to take one Atlanta defender here. Second team that popped up on my list here, because I tend to stay home teams with defenders, just like Ryan said, that number is always better there. Sporting Kansas City, even with some rotation, kind of bubbled up to the top of my teams, and this isn't me being a homer at this point. I like Philly. What I saw from Philly against Toronto was a very anemic attack. They were getting the ball into some dangerous areas, but they weren't connecting those final passes. They weren't really getting the quality shots that I would look for. Sporting, whether it's the first string or the second string, is going to be able to force some errors on that. And Philly's only goal, I think, came from the spot this week. So it wasn't even like they got a good chance from the run of play to get that goal. It came from the spot. So that one just kind of bubbles up. So with that in mind, Melia was kind of my first choice here. And then I went with Sinovic, and Fontas is supposed to be healthy, but there's a lot of wiggle room here. They're going to play in Panama again this week and then come back for a Sunday game. So this is a chance where you're going to see somebody like a Smith or a Lindsay or a Wallace come in who may have a little bit better price point here. So that's the other reason why I'm looking at him, is it's home team, going to potentially be good prices. I'm not sold on Melia, but I just threw him in there for now. I may look at San Jose's keeper because he's still at that cheap price and do the switcheroo there into Melia. If I was going to take a flyer on a road team, it'd be Minnesota, but San Jose showed that they can link some passes together and got a goal in on Montreal at home. So again, that's the road game that I don't really want to look at. Everything else just kind of made me nervous with, I don't like the attacks I'm seeing coming into the home teams, and I don't like the way the defenses line up. So, I mean, if I had to rank them, it'd be Atlanta, Sporting, and RSL at home. But I like some other options from both Atlanta and RSL. So Sporting's kind of carrying the bulk of that load. I think there's going to be some rotation in the attack. So I'm not sure if I'm going to want to come in with their forwards and with their attacking players. So I'm looking heavy defense right there.
All right, Ryan.
Yeah, so I'm actually I had a similar thought. Atlanta is going to be high up for me. So Guzan, what is Guzan now for price? He's is he just over 5?
Yeah, I think he's close to 6.
Okay, all right. So Guzan was a keeper pick that I thought. Honestly, I gotta say, I gotta go Vega as well from San Jose, because again, it's hard. You can't find a $4 million keeper out there. So throw him in there. If he plays and plays well, awesome. You're gonna end up with a great score, and then you could have 1 or 2 million more to spend on something else. But if that doesn't work out, I'm planning on going. I might still try to go Fry against Colorado, but I like the Melia option as well against Philadelphia. And then I'm going to have a tough decision because we've got 3 of the better goalkeepers, I think, in MLS, and they're all against questionable offensive teams in Colorado, Philadelphia, and Cincinnati. So I don't know which way I'm going to go yet, but it's going to be one of those 3, I think, as the switcheroo option if Vega doesn't work out, which I have conflict issues with. If Vega, I'm hoping Vega doesn't work out, but I'm hoping he is. And it's just
It's interesting to note too that Vega got 1 point, gave up 2 goals, and his price did not drop. I'm not sure if 4.0 is.
Go for
Did we establish that 4 was the floor?
Because
I thought we had
it was a floor. I think we were told it and confirmed it last year that it was a floor. You can't go below 4.
Okay.
So I think that
the question is why is there a less than 4 category as the maximum on this? You were going to say that same thing. Okay.
That's exactly why I'm like, it's an option. But
it might have just been a fluke. So that's
a quick aside with this. Some people have been asking about the price change mechanic, and we don't really know that yet. Just like Ryan said before, we still need a few more games to get this figured out. What I do know about the price change mechanic from conversations I've had and what we know from the website is it is based on player performance with a larger weight on the current form as opposed to previous form. Last year, it was like a 5-week rolling form, 3-week average, weird kind of thing like that. But that's why you're seeing some of the changes right now. It's always a little bit more volatile within the first few games, first 5-ish games, because MLS has to establish an average for each price value, essentially. And it's what they think is going to happen. And as players perform, that's going to start to change and flow. And so if they were off at the beginning of the season, or just from their score, like Alessandrini could have done great, but he got 1 point, so he lost 0.5 because that's the maximum loss or gain. And clearly they weren't expecting him to only earn 1 point. So
that's why I thought, man, I should have gained 2 million, but then okay, that's why.
So that's sort of why we're seeing some of this fluctuation. It's gonna even out, but that's what we know right now. Is it focuses more on the early form than it does later form, which was a big change that people wanted, because last year, if you had 3 good rounds or 2 good rounds in the past, and then you just did nothing the next 2 or 3 games, you could still rise. And they're like, doesn't make any sense. That guy only got 1 point. Why is he going up? So we should learn more in the next few weeks, and we'll try to talk more about that again. But as far as the defense, no, go ahead.
One general trend I'm seeing, just watching this and read your section early on about the budget players, highlighting the guys like an Akindele who started off at 6-0. He went up the full 0.4 with the 7 score. Zlatan, as a premium 11 million, I think went up 0.2 with the same score. So if you're wanting to hedge your bets, he had an 8 and he went up 0.2. Akindele had a 7, went up 4. If you want to hedge your bets a little bit and try to predict the score model a little bit, your cheaper options are going to be the higher to trend up. Your more expensive options are going to have the higher potential to trend down, just based on what seems to be some unwritten thresholds that we don't know. We haven't figured them out. But the guys that are cheaper, like Jordan Morris got the 2 goals, 12 points, went up the full 0.5 because he started at an 8. He had that lower price point. So it seems like the system is looking at it a little bit as, if you're a lower price, we expect less of you to earn your money. If you're a higher price, we expect more of you to keep your value.
Mm-hmm. And that's good. That should make it a bit less spiky as we experienced last year. So,
well, actually, that is the model that they used last year. It was just that it was so quick adjusting, and so what it was trying to do was, within a span of 2 or 3 weeks, get a player to the value that they should have been had they been playing at this level. Whereas, so I think this is using the same model of, we want to get that player to that value, but it's okay if it takes a little bit longer time to do that, which is more what. It's kind of a combination of what we had 2 years ago, where it was just, what was it, like 0.2 million increases.
The average system, I loved it.
Yeah, well, it was one of those things that it didn't really ever adjust a player down to an appropriate level if they were just terrible, and it didn't really make a certain player ever worth, or it made them so much worth that there was always those value players, and they never became non-value players if they kept on performing at that value. Whereas this one will actually require, I think, a little bit more analysis, like last year, to say, okay, I can't just keep on picking the same players every week because of how good they are as a value. I have to actually think about, okay, well, this player has now risen to the point that his average
plateau
is about, it's about what he should be for his price range. And so then you have to figure out, okay, now let's go find some other value somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I like the fact that it's not that it's changing faster, but yeah, last year was a black box model and no one knew what was going on initially. So
I'll blow through my keepers and defender information right now. You guys have named a lot of the teams that I'm also targeting as well. Atlanta is going up against Cincinnati, so I think they're not really getting it yet. I'm also high on Seattle. Sporting Kansas City could be good. I want to see what they line up with in that game. A lot of those early games, questions for me again, just like last time. Some of these matchups could work. If Vancouver's really got it going, how will RSL do? Minnesota seems to have its game going on, so that might work against San Jose, which was okay. And then we've got LA and Dallas, some question marks there. I kind of like that one, though. LA did struggle a little bit, and they've lost Alan Sandrini. So Dallas is another team that I think has a shot at a clean sheet. I actually have 2 Dallas players. I have Hollingshead and Cannon right now in my team. Cannon's on the bench, kind of letting me hedge my bets to go if I want to go double Dallas defenders. But I've also got Gonzalez in right now, and I'm thinking of doing a keeperoo with Gonzalez. And I haven't decided who I'm going to go with yet. Probably it'll be Vega. Just because you never know. I mean, he's 4.0. I mean, if he gets a few bonus points, he might rise in value. So that's there.
While we're on keepers, Vega should be in 100% of lineups until until his price rises, because you cannot lose money with Vega at this point. He can't go down. If he gets a clean sheet ever, he's going to go up 0.2, 0.3. That's free money from MLS for you. He should be in 100% of lineups.
That's what we'd like to call BAM. Those are boss bucks right there. So get your Bam, Tam, and Gam right there, and Bam's for fantasy. I've still got Smith in my lineup because I like his service, and then I've also got Robinson right now as sort of a placeholder for Atlanta because since they are going to be Cincinnati, I'm trying to do 3 Atlanta players, and but I want to see who lines up for sure because you never know with the CCL. Let's move on to the midfielders now. Ryan, we'll let you start this one off.
Sure. So I think I'm going to probably stick with so much for changing my team every week, but I think I'm going to stick with Lodero and Victor Rodriguez because I know that the price changes are going to be more on recent results, but both of them rose by 0.5 million, so maybe some residual will be left over coming next week. And frankly, they've got a pretty darn good matchup against Colorado. Like you said, though, I mean, we don't know. Maybe Colorado is better than last year. I certainly hope they are, just for their sake. But I think that they still have a good matchup against them. And then I'm thinking about some RSL midfielders as well. So Joao Plata is always a favorite of the analytics community. I consider him to be RSL's best player, maybe outside of Nick Rimando. But I'm always shocked whenever he's not in the lineup, despite the fact that for some reason he isn't in the lineup like a third of the time. But and it's not due to injury either. Say what?
He subbed in this last week.
He did, yes, and he got an average of 1 point, which makes him so that he actually went down 0.4, which now is making me reconsider putting him in my lineup.
Rusnak? What about a Rusnak?
Man, he's expensive.
That's true.
That is a hefty price to pay for. What did he get last week? Did he rise quite a bit, or
he scored a goal last week? So I think he probably got a few.
He was probably 10 last week. He's 10.5 now. Yeah, that's. If we're keeping our forwards in here that we want, and I'm guessing I know that a forward that's going to be on a lot of people's minds, then I think Plata's just so cheap. I mean, 8.6 for a midfielder that if he starts, that's always the problem. I don't ever know if he's going to start. So how early did they play? Did they play early?
RSL plays at 6, so they're playing. You would still have a shot at San Jose player or another Seattle player.
Seattle Sporting
or Minnesota.
But yeah, so I think I'll do that, and then somebody from RSL, probably Plata, but somebody. There's a couple other budget ones in there. So one of you guys mentioned Baird. Oh, he's a forward. Never mind. We'll wait on those guys.
Blayne, who are you thinking?
Yeah. Well, I ran 4 premium players last week, and I'm going to run 4 again this week, and 3 of them line up in my midfield, and that's Rusnak, Acosta, and Ladero. I am taking Acosta on the road against New York City. They were, I mean, it was a road game to Orlando, but they gave up 2 and should have given up a third off the penalty there at the end. I mean, again, controversial call that went their way. I think Acosta can carve them up on the road, especially playing on that small field. I like the way this one's going to go. If New York can't hold him in check, he's going to get fouled a lot. And so that's just points for us too. Ladero is just, I mean, we saw what he can do. His average is up there. I think there is going to be some residual holdover, and that also goes in Acosta's favor. I'm going to bring in Rodriguez for this one as well. Colorado's playing that diamond. That's going to mean he's got a lot of space to work in on the wings. I think Morris could be this other option here as well. I won't do it, but I could see if Homer wanted to grab Rodriguez, Morris, and Ladero, it paying off for them this week, playing home against Colorado. Just there's going to be space to work in. And then I've got Shea on there. He looked good in CCL. He's got that left foot. He's getting forward. He's under that 5 million mark and really kind of driving the attack down that left wing. And eventually he's going to break it open and score some points. And I think this could be the chance for it. As you said last week with Rui Diaz, and you called it, they're going to clog the middle, which may hurt Martinez, but that could leave a lot of space for Shea to work in and whip a lot of balls in this week. So those are kind of the 5 I'm looking at here. Shea's cheap enough where I could do a auto switcheroo with him, either to a defender, bring him in late, or just there's some cheap options floating around that could possibly work into this lineup.
Yeah, it's interesting choices for this round because there are lots of solid matchups and teams with multiple players you could go with. Shea is definitely a good value option. Didn't perform as well against Sporting Kansas City, but that was Sporting Kansas City. Didn't perform as well last week against DC, but that's a tough game. Let's just, be straight with that was a tough game. So he has done well in CCL, and if you need a budget midfielder, he is probably the go-to budget midfielder this round. 4.9, I think is what he is, and Cincinnati has issues right there. For me, I'm also going with Ladero. I had V-Rod in my team early on. I actually swapped him out, changed out some stuff, and I got him Pity Martinez. He's really legit just a placeholder right now because I know he didn't start last game. That changed pretty quickly because they were in trouble and they needed some of that playmaking in there. And so I'm wondering if they'll decide to rest him again for Cincinnati, since it should be an easier game, or if they're going to be like, we need points. We need them now. We're at home. People want to see Pity. We're playing Pity. So if Pity plays against Cincinnati, I may stick with that big money right there, but I got to get some value someplace else. So I've got Frankowski from Chicago. He did okay in that last game. Orlando's defense, not solid still. But he's really a placeholder as I'm still examining options. Another one that I'm looking at is Eriksson. We mentioned him before. He was playing just under Wando, kind of a second striker sort of deal, but he's technically a midfielder at 7.4. I thought he was a pretty good value as well. So those are some of the guys I'm looking at right now. I also like Rusnak, but he was with my budget right now. Did not work. If I don't go with Pity, I'll probably add in Rusnak, and then I'll swap probably Frankowski for Shea to get that Atlanta coverage. Let's go on to forwards now. Blayne.
Yeah, so I said 4 premium players. The 4th one shows up right here, and that's Joseph Martinez. I know what you said, Reid, since he shut down Rui Diaz, but he still managed to get a goal on that. I think Martinez is the better overall striker than Rui Diaz. Cincinnati being on the road here, I like this matchup. I don't see how you can justify not taking Martinez unless you're bringing in somebody unless it's to bring in somebody like a Ladero or a Rusnak, who's probably got a better home matchup and a little bit more consistent points floor. But that said, I don't think you want to skip out on this when Martinez is averaging a goal a game or almost a goal a game in his MLS career. He didn't get one last week. He's due. He's beyond due at this point. I mean, this could be an easy multi-goal game, and while you may be able to justify it, you do not want to miss out on this if he has a multi-goal game. I mean, this is your go-to forward here. Because I'm throwing all the money at the midfield, I've actually got Corey Baird in from RSL as the forward here. 6.9, got a goal last week, or an assist last week, just putting in some good work. Yeah, it was an assist last week and 2 attacking bonus points. So that's pretty good for a forward, considering we don't get bonus points very often from this position. Even if he doesn't get the goal or the assist, a couple of bonus points at his price is not going to hurt too much. You can't take 6 midfielders, so you got to find that second forward to go in a 5-2 lineup, because you don't want to be starting 4 defenders this week. He's my go-to here. I'm hoping for a goal at home on this one. Vancouver looked okay, but I think RSL's that legit here.
I think he's due is a statistical or analytical trap that a lot of people fall into.
I was going to say that I wouldn't say anything, but I probably would have said something.
Well, go ahead and keep saying things. Who are you looking at?
Okay. Well, I'm looking at Corey Baird from RSL. He's 6.9, and he got 7 last week. What did he get? Did he get a goal? He got an assist, and he played, and he got 2 bonus points. I forgot. Did you mention him, Blayne?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I was looking at my other screen, and I was.
Jay will be happy we're recapping and giving Baird all this attention.
There you go. And then right now I have Josef in my central forward starting position here. I am a little worried because I am trying to go for increase in value, that because of the negative 0.4 that he got last week in value, that will be somewhat carried over. I don't imagine him getting back to 11 million again if he even if he does do a double, he gets a brace or something like that. I don't imagine him getting back that value, but he might be worth the risk. Like you said, I'm not going to say he's due, but he is a very good striker in hopefully what is a good system, and you would expect him to get. I think his expected goals last year was somewhere in the 0.7 to 0.9 goals expected per game. So really, really freaking good. So it was. I'd say I'd go with him, and then I've got Manotas right now starting as well, and he's 9.7. He increased by 0.2 million last week, and so he could have a chance to go up and carry some of that value. But I think he got a goal. Yeah, so you'd be relying on his goal scoring. I don't think he's going to get many bonus points at all. But he played the full 90, I think, and he got a goal off of that. So I'm hoping to carry his price rise, but Houston's got a great matchup against Montreal. I don't know if Montreal has really shored up their defense all that much. And they got rid of half their defenders and then didn't bring in that many more new ones, from what I remember. Don't quote me on that, but that looks like a juicy matchup for Houston as well.
So I've got 2 forwards, and I also have Joseph Martinez. So I'm with you guys this week. I won't say he's due either. I'll use some other buzzwords that may be more palatable. He has a scoring frequency that tends to make him consistent, and that can be not always viewed as an outlier for the charts. Did I hit some good words?
There we go.
That word. No, I mean, I like Joseph. I think Rui Diaz was more susceptible to getting shut down than maybe Joseph is. He does just kind of get in through those slots, and that might be able to be exploited with Cincinnati. But who knows? They may just go completely bunker, and all these Atlanta picks aren't going to work out, or he gets rested. So we'll see. I've got Joseph. I think Seattle's worth going all in, just like Atlanta's worth going all in this round. Because Colorado's going to be missing Axel, and so that's definitely a starting defender that they're not going to be having. So, and they're going to travel some this week. So I think those are 2 teams that are worth going all in with. It's just who. And I think one defender is okay for Colorado. Maybe it's a switcheroo just to see what happens with Rubio and Kai. But right now I've got Morris on my team. He got that 0.5, so getting that brace is clearly more than he was expected. Some of that price may carry over, and some of that form may carry over as well, especially if they are a little bit weak there, if they have to shift over to try to cover Ladero, that's going to get Morris open on the right. Maybe he's going to get some of those assists from Smith. That's what I'm hoping for. Ultimately, that would be fantastic. But if I don't end up going with V-Rod, then I'm probably going to go with Jordan Morris, who I have right now, just because I was really impressed with his work and what he's doing right there. On the bench right now, like I'm tossing around who that budget player is. Some of it's going to depend on who I have in the midfield and what kind of money I have left over. Right now, I have Epp4 with New York City FC. I heard Mike talking about it earlier, though, and he was cautioning that there could be lots of rotation still with New York. So he was a $6 million. Actually, he's actually a midfielder. I thought he was a forward. I have a scrub forward up there right now. So scratch that, add him to my midfielder list. But I'm also looking at Baird as a possible option for a forward. That may be a situation where I have another scrub midfielder in there and have Baird on the bench to see who I like of a 3 bench option to go in. But we'll see. There's some good options this week. Captains, who are you guys looking at right now? Ryan.
I feel like I have to go with Ladero again. He's just too good. I don't know that there's anybody else on. I mean, what are the good matchups? You got Sporting Kansas City. I wouldn't pick anybody on them as a captain. You got Atlanta, maybe Joseph, but again, he does get goals, but that's a lot of what he relies on. And so with a captain pick, I usually want to go with somebody that I know is going to score at least some consistent points. Maybe that's why I never get first place at anything, is I'm just take the safe road. Huh? I'm always consistently above average. But I don't know. I think Seattle's just got a good matchup. And the only other person that I might consider maybe would be somebody along the Real Salt Lake line. I always like Plata, but again, he's too much of a risk to start. So I got to go Ladero.
Blayne.
I haven't given Lily the opportunity to pick my captain yet. But I always draw 3 cards for her, and the 3 names I'm throwing on there are Martinez, Ladero, and Rusnak this week.
Hey,
I'm the exact opposite of Ryan. I always go for the home run and pray that it balances out in the end. So I sacrifice I think I sacrificed 6 points for round 1 by picking Zlatan over Ladero. In the grand scheme of things, I lost out, I think, on 6 points.
Mm-hmm.
That's not terrible. And so if I were to go Martinez this week and he gets the hat trick and Ladero does typical Ladero things, I could easily make up those 6 points by captaining 2 forwards in a row.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm giving Lily 2 midfielders this week to choose from in Ladero and Rusnak because I think both of them have the averages at home that will propel them into being 2 of your better captain choices this week. I will get this out on Twitter and stuff when Lily picks my captain for me. Right now, I've got it on Martinez, switching back to Ladero and back and forth while I keep updating my lineup. But I'll let Lily pick, but that's kind of my view on this, and I'll get you my captain pick this week.
So right now, I'm in a very similar situation. I have Ladero on my team because he is definitely one of my top 2 captain options. Martinez is in the running for that because I think Cincinnati could give up some points again. However, if Pity Martinez plays, I will likely put my captain on him because I like captaining midfielders, especially the offensive midfielders, because they have those bonus point chances more so than forwards, like I've already mentioned. So the chances for goals and assists and crosses and key passes and all of that good stuff, I think makes a midfielder usually a better option as a captain. But of course, Blayne, you're absolutely right. If you get a hat trick and have a captain, which has never happened for me because I tend to always like midfielders, I tend to miss off on that big payoff, and that can't help. But I think that's hard to guess, and so I think midfielders are more consistent.
One thing about Pity
forward every week, and then you get it eventually.
Yeah, always Martinez.
One thing about Pity that I ended up I just looked up right here. So he played 31 minutes, and he got he had 31 passes. So that is a pretty good level. There's not many players that average more than 80 passes a game. That's Ladero amount of passes there just to put him on that level. So if that's a very, very, very small sample size, but if he maintains that level of passing, that could bode extremely well for his future, just from even from a bonus point perspective.
Mm-hmm. So, but again, it will depend on what happens. Quick turnarounds for Atlanta. I think it's 4 games after their CCL, and then that's the MLS game, and then 3 games before the next. So there's some quick turns around. Maybe it's 4-4-3 between CCL, MLS, and the next CCL game. So there's some quick turns around. So there could be resting, though that's not always a word in the Atlanta vocabulary. So we'll see what happens with Pity Martinez at home. Home opener, they may want him to be there for sure. Thank you so much, guys, for those player picks. I hope those of you listening found that helpful, especially those new players who are still getting into the swing of MLS things. We're happy to have you as part of the MLS Fantasy family. Wrapping things up now, we're going to move on to our MLS Fantasy Insider Hosts Head-to-Head Experts Invitational League, and also our Patreon League, which I'm going to start out with. I'm going to sound off the Patreon names in the next episode or 2. A few people are still subscribing, so I want to get as many as I can in the first go-around. But thank you to all of our new patrons who have subscribed and donated to the podcast. Our prize league is the head-to-head league. At least this season, I may switch it up and do the overall season, the overall league as our fall prize league. But at least this season, we're doing the head-to-head league. So a lot of fun. You never know what's going to happen in head-to-head. Right now, we have Michael Bredjik of FC Star Fox, who is leading the way with his goal differential. We have Bryce Littman of Bryce Union in second place. And then we have our fellow Cincinnati fan, RJ Gage of Law Dogs, who is third place in the Patreon League. So those guys are all in the running for prizes. We give prizes to the top 3 players. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You guys are doing well. In our Experts League, I already mentioned we had an 80-point average. Right at the top right now, we have Ryan, who's sitting with us. Did not get the highest score, but he has the highest point differential, plus 25 points on that, so that's good.
In other words, I'm lucky.
Hey, you're above average.
Small sample size.
Classic fantasy help for here. Jason Sagini, top score, 101 points, our only triple point score this round. He did very well. We also have updates for ourselves. I lost a close game to Fantasy Football 24/7's Mito. That was I think I mathed wrong, and I thought we were going to draw, but Alessandrini and Wynn definitely let me down for that one. Blayne, you lost to Jason, which he got the most points, so nothing to do about that.
There were only 6 scores higher than mine this week, and I happened to get one of them. Like, that's head-to-head, though. I love it. I wouldn't change it for anything.
Love it. Mike lost to one of our top Patreon supporters, Sherry Snyder. So good job, Sherry, coming out hard against Mike right there. And then just also want to point out that looking at the MLSFI crew versus the Extra Time crew, we did pretty good overall. Both Bobby and Doyle finished below all of us, I think in the 60s. One of them may have had a 70 score, but they finished both below us. Weeby and Ben did really well, though. Weeby had a very strong score, and he won his first round. So hashtag redemption for Weeby seems to be happening this season. But I think a good, solid showing for the MLSFI crew against the Extra Time crew plus Ben at the beginning of this season. So lots of fun. Keep up for that. We're going to keep following up on that and sending out some banter. That's all that we have for the show today. Final plugs, Blayne.
Nothing much for me. I'm trying to figure out what my next Fantasy Boss article is going to be. I think we got a new
WD-40.
Yeah, WD-40. I guess I got to give them a shout out. My chair doesn't squeak tonight. That's awesome.
Right.
I think we got a new writer this last week who really wanted the article that I was lining up for, and by all means, I will hand off articles like that when we got somebody involved that really wants to do something. I'm excited to read his piece coming up this week just to see what he's going to do with it. It's not one I've written in the past very often, but hey, we got an excited new writer out there, so go check him out. Reid, what's his name again? Is that Trevor?
Trey. Yeah, sorry, I didn't. I should have mentioned him earlier, but yeah, Trey's going to be writing some stuff about player options that you have in response to injuries and big breaking news. So,
yeah. So I guess my plug would be hit us up, tweet at Fantasy Boss, tweet at MLSFI, tweet at me, however you want to get out there. What article we're missing that you want to see us do, and I'll just grab it. I mean, Trey wants to do this one. That's kind of what he came in and asked to do before he even saw our breakdown. So I'm excited to see his work, but hit us up with what you want us to write, and I'll see if I can bring it to you.
Ryan, what you go again?
All right, so I'll plug at MLS Fantasy Stats on Twitter, and I've got like I mentioned before, I've got my pinned tweet. There is the link to the Flow FC article on using analytics to build out your lineup, especially if you are running short on time and need to pick some people based off of very few bits of information. So that's one thing to look at, and I'll give a shout out to, I'm a part of American Soccer Analysis as well. And I've written one article for them so far, but they've got a lot of other good content. They did some fantastic team previews as well that you should go check out. We'll see how good their projected lineups are. That some of them didn't work out very well, but they're always a good follow. They'll give you all the analytics side of things. And then if you want another guy that he doesn't know that I'm doing this, but if you want another guy that's really good with both the analytics side of things and with fantasy, I would follow at the Dummy Run. There we go, at the Dummy Run, and he's way more active on Twitter than I am, and he's funny and also throws in a lot of good analysis side of things too. So he's a good follow.
We'll try to get him on the show sometime.
Yeah.
Ryan also gets stuff on Fantasy Boss every now and then. Usually it's just a chart here or there, but yeah, check out his stuff. And of course, for me, you can check out everything that I do over at MLSFantasyBoss.com and r/fantasy MLS subreddit. You can check out this podcast and extras over at YouTube. And also, please be sure to sign up for the new MLS Fantasy newsletter that I am doing. You can just Google search for MLS Fantasy Newsletter. It brings up the subscription. There's also a link on Reddit and my Twitter, and I'm going to have it on Fantasy Boss soon. Subscribe to that. I'm answering questions and giving a bit more personal breakdown as far as what to look at for each round. It's not going to be the fantasy picks per se. It's just kind of giving general advice and tips to help, especially new people. We want to get you guys involved in this fantasy community. So subscribe to the newsletter, get my advice and tips straight to your inbox, and you'll also see some of Skylar's positional rankings connected with that as well. So head over to do that, MLSsoccer.com. Thank you so much for listening tonight, and good luck.